For decades, Kenny Loggins has been known as one of the smoothest voices in pop and soft rock, a man who crafted timeless hits like Footloose, Danger Zone, and This Is It. His music defined generations, with a career spanning everything from tender ballads to high-energy anthems that became cultural milestones. Fans saw him as approachable, easygoing, and universally liked, the kind of artist who got along with everyone in the business. But now, at 77, Kenny Loggins has shocked the music world by finally speaking candidly about the darker side of his career. For the first time, he revealed the names of 6 fellow musicians he absolutely could not stand. Far from the friendly image he projected for decades, Loggins opened up about feuds, betrayals, and rivalries that left him resentful long after the spotlight faded. These weren't petty disagreements. According to Loggins, these artists either belittled him, stole opportunities, or dismissed his talent outright. Some clashed with him during collaborations gone wrong, while others embodied everything he disliked about the music industry. For years, he stayed quiet, preferring to focus on his work rather than stir controversy. But as he reflects on his legacy, Loggins no longer feels the need to hide the truth, and the truth isn't pretty. Fans who thought of him as an easygoing hitmaker will be stunned to learn the names on his list. And the raw honesty with wit for most of his career, Kenny Loggins carried a reputation as one of the most approachable figures in music. He wasn't a scandal magnet, nor did he thrive on drama like some of his rock contemporaries. Instead, he was the guy who gave audiences upbeat classics like Footloose and soaring ballads like Celebrate Me Home. To fans, he seemed immune to conflict, always smiling, always grateful, and always above the kind of rivalries that often tore the music industry apart. But as Loggins himself has recently admitted, that public image came at a cost. Behind the scenes, he carried grudges that he chose not to reveal. Until now, at 77, the singer-songwriter has pulled back the curtain, naming 6 musicians he openly disliked, artists who clashed with him on creative, personal, or professional levels. 2 of those names may come as a shock, particularly because they were once close to him during important chapters of his career. The first is Jim Messina, the man who partnered with him in the successful duo Loggins and Messina. To fans, they were magic together, blending country rock with pop melodies to create hits like Danny's Song and Your Mama Don't Dance. But behind closed doors, their relationship was fraught with tension. Loggins has revealed that he often felt overshadowed by Messina, who had already been part of Buffalo Springfield and Poco before joining him. Messina, according to Loggins, treated him like a junior partner rather than an equal, a dynamic that created deep resentment. It was his way or the highway, Loggins once admitted. While the duo produced incredible music, the partnership ended badly, leaving bitterness that Loggins carried for years. The second name on his list is more surprising, Michael McDonald. The 2 collaborated on several hits, including This Is It and What a Fool Believes, both of which became staples of late 70s and early 80s pop. Fans assumed their working relationship was seamless, but Loggins later revealed it wasn't always smooth sailing. He described McDonald as brilliant but stubborn, someone who had a knack for making Loggins feel creatively dismissed. During writing sessions, their differing approaches often led to heated debates. McDonald, with his deep, soulful voice and perfectionist tendencies, sometimes clashed with Loggins' more free-flowing style. While they created timeless songs together, the process left scars. Loggins confessed that as much as he respected McDonald's talent, he grew to hate working with him. These revelations stunned fans who had always seen Loggins and McDonald as close collaborators. To hear Loggins say that he resented the tension, and at times, McDonald himself, was to see behind the curtain of what looked like an ideal creative partnership. For years, Loggins kept quiet about these conflicts, largely because he didn't want to tarnish the legacy of the music they created together. But now, at 77, he feels he has nothing to lose by telling the truth. For him, it isn't about bitterness anymore. It's about honesty. As he explains, the pressure of maintaining a Mr. Nice Guy image in the cutthroat music industry was exhausting. He wants fans to know that behind every hit song, there were struggles, egos, and relationships that often soured. And that honesty begins with Jim Messina and Michael McDonald, 2 men who helped shape his career, but also left him with memories that were far from fond. He describes his disdain. While Kenny Loggins built his reputation on smooth melodies, soaring choruses, and radio-friendly hooks, his career occasionally collided with the harder edges of the rock world. These encounters were rarely pleasant. In fact, two of the names he revealed on his list of most disliked musicians came directly from those moments, both representing the kinds of egos and attitudes Loggins despised. The first was Eddie Van Halen. To many, Van Halen was a guitar god, an innovator who redefined the possibilities of rock. But to Loggins, his experience with Eddie was anything but inspiring. In the early 1980s, when Loggins was transitioning from soft rock into more high-energy sounds, he attempted to collaborate with rock icons to broaden his appeal. According to Loggins, Eddie Van Halen dismissed him outright. The guitarist reportedly mocked his music as too lightweight and referred to him as the Footloose guy, even before the song had become the worldwide phenomenon it did. For Loggins, who was already insecure about proving himself outside of the soft rock bubble, Eddie's sneering comments cut deep. He later admitted that while he admired Van Halen's talent, he hated the arrogance and the way Eddie seemed to go out of his way to belittle others in the industry. The second clash came with Don Henley of the Eagles. On the surface, Loggins and Henley should have been kindred spirits, both singer-songwriters, both products of the California sound of the 70s, both pursuing polished, heartfelt music. But according to Loggins, Henley embodied the very worst of rock star ego. During encounters at award shows and industry events, Henley reportedly dismissed Loggins as too commercial and accused him of chasing radio hits rather than artistry. Henley's sharp tongue and cold demeanor left a lasting impression. Loggins described him as someone who never missed an opportunity to put you down, and he walked away from those interactions with a deep dislike. For the Eagles' frontman, what makes these confessions striking is that, to the public, Kenny Loggins rarely showed his frustrations with the rock elite. He always seemed comfortable in his own lane, never visibly rattled by criticism. But in truth, he carried these encounters with him for decades. They weren't simply professional rivalries. They were personal insults that made him feel small in an industry already overflowing with big personalities. Loggins explained that his resentment wasn't just about the words or attitudes of Van Halen and Henley. It was about what they represented. To him, they embodied a toxic culture in music, one where collaboration took a backseat to ego and where dismissiveness could crush younger or more vulnerable artists. He hated that culture, and he hated the way these musicians reinforced it. And yet, he admits there was a strange silver lining. Those negative experiences fueled him. When Eddie Van Halen mocked his work, Loggins channeled that anger into proving he could deliver songs with staying power. When Don Henley called him too commercial, Loggins doubled down, creating tracks like Danger Zone and Footloose that remain cultural staples decades later. In his words, sometimes hate is a great motivator. Still, the bitterness lingered. And now, at 77, Loggins is unafraid to admit that he carried it with him for much of his career. He respected Eddie Van Halen's talent, and he acknowledged Don Henley's artistry. But he also wanted people to know, respect doesn't erase resentment. As Kenny Loggins revealed his list of the 6 musicians he hated the most, the final 2 names stunned fans even more than the first 4. These weren't just casual acquaintances or fleeting rivals. They were artists whose paths crossed with his in meaningful ways, and whose actions left scars that lingered for decades. The first was Stevie Nicks. To the outside world, Nicks was the ethereal queen of Fleetwood Mac, and her solo career carried the kind of mystique that made her one of the most respected women in rock. But to Loggins, she was also a source of bitter disappointment. In the early 1980s, the two were close collaborators, recording the hit duet Whenever I Call You Friend. The song became one of Loggins' signature tracks, but behind the scenes, their working relationship unraveled. According to Loggins, Nicks's erratic behavior and difficult scheduling nearly derailed the project. Worse, he felt she took sole credit for the song's emotional power in interviews, downplaying his role in its success. Loggins later admitted that while he admired her voice, he grew to despise the tension she created in the studio. "I hated the chaos," he said bluntly, referring to their clashes. Fans had always imagined the two as a harmonious duo, but the reality was far from it. The second shocking name on his list was Phil Collins. While Collins is often remembered as the voice of Genesis and one of the most successful solo artists of the 1980s, Loggins revealed that their relationship soured almost immediately after they met. Collins reportedly dismissed Loggins as lightweight pop, claiming that his music lacked the depth or grit to be taken seriously. These words hit Loggins hard, especially because they came at a time when he was fighting to be seen as more than just a soundtrack hitmaker. To make matters worse, when both artists were at their commercial peak in the mid-80s, industry insiders frequently compared them. Rather than treat it as friendly competition, Collins allegedly mocked Loggins behind the scenes, fueling a quiet feud that fans never knew existed. For Loggins, these betrayals weren't about ego alone. They cut at something deeper, his sense of authenticity. He always prided himself on writing heartfelt songs, often pulling from his own struggles and vulnerabilities. To have fellow musicians dismiss his work as shallow or opportunistic left him feeling disrespected. While he chose to remain silent at the time, he admits now that he carried an anger towards Stevie Nicks and Phil Collins that never fully went away. What makes these final two names so revealing is that they show how even collaborations and seemingly friendly rivalries could turn sour. With Stevie Nicks, the betrayal came from inside the studio, where a shared project left him feeling undermined. With Phil Collins, the wound was more public, a battle for credibility in the court of opinion, where Collins's barbs made Loggins feel like an outsider in his own era. At 77, Loggins says he doesn't hate these people anymore in the literal sense, but in the past, the feelings were very real. "I was angry, I was resentful, and I hated what they represented in my life," he admitted. And while fans may be surprised to hear these confessions now, Loggins insists that telling the truth is freeing. After years of carrying grudges quietly, he wants his audience to know the unpolished reality of his journey, that even the smoothest voices in music face disharmony behind the scenes. When Kenny Loggins finally broke his silence about the 6 musicians he hated the most, it wasn't about fueling old grudges or stirring controversy for its own sake. At 77, Loggins explained that his decision came from a place of reflection, a need to tell the full story of his career, not just the glossy version fans have carried for decades. For him, naming Jim Messina, Michael McDonald, Eddie Van Halen, Don Henley, Stevie Nicks, and Phil Collins wasn't about vengeance. It was about honesty. Loggins admitted that carrying those grudges in silence for years was exhausting. He had built an image of himself as Mr. Nice Guy, the approachable star who never had a bad word to say about anyone. But behind the scenes, he was no different than any other artist. He had his rivalries, his betrayals, and his moments of bitterness. By speaking openly now, he hopes fans will understand that those feelings were real and, in many ways, helped shape the music they love. He reflected on how those negative experiences became motivators. Feeling belittled by Eddie Van Halen pushed him to prove he could create high-energy anthems that stood the test of time. Being dismissed by Don Henley only drove him to embrace his own lane unapologetically, producing radio staples that remain etched in pop culture. Even the chaos of Stevie Nicks and the sting of Phil Collins's insults gave him perspective, that not every collaboration or comparison needs to define you. In his words, sometimes hate isn't permanent. Sometimes it's fuel, yet there are also regrets. Loggins has admitted that holding on to bitterness for so long kept him from reconciling with people he once considered friends. His falling out with Jim Messina, for example, still carries a weight he wishes he could resolve. The tension with Michael McDonald, while professionally fruitful, left him wondering what their partnership might have achieved if they had been more at peace. Even his feud with Collins, largely one-sided, born of dismissive words, now seems, in hindsight, like wasted energy. "I wish I had let go sooner," he confessed. Still, fans see in this late-life honesty something refreshing. In an industry where many artists cling to their image until the very end, Loggins is unafraid to admit that he wasn't perfect, nor were his peers. He acknowledges the flaws, the resentments, and the messy human dynamics behind the polished songs. That willingness to pull back the curtain, even if it isn't good, is part of what makes his story resonate now more than ever. Perhaps most telling is what Loggins says about forgiveness. While he no longer harbors active hatred for these musicians, he admits he will never forget how those moments made him feel. But he also recognizes that those same experiences shaped his resilience. Without those clashes, betrayals, and dismissals, the Kenny Loggins we know, the man who gave us Danger Zone, Footloose, and a catalog of hits that defined generations, might never have existed. As he looks back, Loggins is candid. "I've had an amazing career, but it wasn't without its shadows. I want people to know both sides, the joy of the music and the battles behind it." For fans, hearing him finally reveal the names and stories behind his grudges is both shocking and strangely comforting. It shows that even someone who seemed universally liked had his share of enemies and frustrations, and it proves that in the end, honesty may be the greatest legacy he can leave behind.